Welcome to the Exploratory. Let's talk about Postman CLI. What is Postman CLI? Postman CLI is a secure command line tool for Postman. It helps you run a collection using its ID or path, then sends the run results back to Postman by default. If you've ever used Newman, you already know that Newman allows you to run and test your collections on the command line, just like Postman CLI. But the key differences are that Newman is open source, while Postman CLI is closed source. Postman CLI is signed by Postman and distributed as a downloadable package, while Newman is unsigned and distributed as NPM and also available as a library. By default, Postman CLI uploads your run results back to Postman Cloud. To do this with Newman, you'll have to install Newman Reporter and use it to upload your run results back to Postman Cloud. Requests executed with Postman CLI are not much different from requests executed in Postman using the collection runner. This means either you run your collection using the Postman CLI or you run them using the collection runner, you can find all your run results in one single place. Postman CLI also has a feature that lets you link your API schema, which does not come with Newman. Depending on your use case, if you want to run and test your collections with software that is signed, secured, and deeply integrated with your Postman account, you should use the Postman CLI. If you want some more visibility into the software you build in your CI/CD pipeline, then you should use Newman because it's open source. You might already know how to run a collection using the collection runner, Newman, webhooks, or monitors. But let's take a look at how you can run a collection using Postman CLI. I already set up a collection that lets us send and get fruit. Now, let's see how we can run this collection using the Postman CLI. First, I'm going to click the Run button at the top navigation menu. I can see that I have two options, one to run manually or two to automate runs via CLI. I'll select automate runs via CLI. But before proceeding, I'll have to download Postman CLI and install it. I'll click on the Download Postman CLI button. This takes me to an installation page on the Postman's Learning Center. Here, I'll find different installation scripts for different operating systems. Since I'm on a Mac OS, I'll copy the installation script relevant to my operating system. I'll copy this script, then head over to my terminal and paste the installation script. Since I already have Postman CLI installed, I'm not going to go over this installation process here. But if you do not have Postman CLI installed, you should click Enter and ensure that Postman CLI installs correctly. To confirm that you have Postman CLI correctly installed, run the command postman --version. This should log the version of Postman CLI you currently have installed on your command line. To check a list of the commands you have available to run on Postman CLI, run the command postman -help. Here, we can immediately see that I have 4 commands and 2 options that I can provide to Postman CLI. I have the collection command, the API command, the login command, and the logout command. The login command here helps me authenticate my Postman CLI with my Postman account using my API key. Let's run the login command. I'll run the command postman login. Now it's requesting for my API key. I'm going to grab my API key from a different window and I'm going to paste my API key. Now I can immediately see that my API key has been successfully added to my Postman CLI. Now I can begin to run collections using my Postman CLI. The first thing I want to do to run a collection is to see what options I have available for the collection command. We can do this using the command postman collection. Then we use the options -h for short or -help. We can see that we have just one command that we could use on the collection command, which is the run command, and it helps us run a collection using the collection ID or its path. Since we already have our collection created here, we could easily grab our collection ID. To do that, we click on your collection. Then on the context bar by the right, click on the info icon. I should see my collection ID, but I'm going to click on the copy collection ID icon right next to my collection ID. Then I'll head over back to my terminal and I'll run the command postman collection run and paste the collection ID and click enter. I can immediately see that it has begun to run my collections, and I could see that it is done running my collection and it's presented me with a table showing my run results. I can see that it had one iteration of which none of it failed, and I can see the different requests, test scripts, pre-request scripts, and assertions that were run. I could see that my collections had 3 assertions of which none of them failed. I could also see the average response time and a URL that indicates where I can see more about the collection run data. I can copy this URL and paste it in my browser. This takes me to a page where I can see the result of my collection run that I just did on my Postman CLI. I could see that 3 tests passed, 0 failed, and it didn't skip any. I could click the View Summary button here to see a summary of my collection run. Some of this information were already presented to me on the Postman CLI interface here. But Postman CLI automatically uploads my run results back to Postman and makes them available on my Postman dashboard. Postman CLI and collections run using the collection runner can also be found in a single place. If I go back to my collections and I click the collection I just ran, I could come to the runs tabs here to see all of my collection runs. Either I ran them with Postman CLI or I ran them using the collection runner. I could see that it has a source attribute here that indicates how the collection was run. And I could select the source filter here to only see collections I ran using Postman CLI or only see collections I ran using the collection runner button. That's how you run a collection using Postman CLI. But what if we just do not want to run it on the CLI, but want to run it on our continuous integration and deployment pipeline? Let's see how we can do that. I already set up a repository on GitHub. We are going to be using this repository with Postman CLI. Each time a commit is made to this repository, Postman CLI will run our collections using GitHub Actions. Let's go back to our collection. I'll click the Run button at the top navigation menu. I'll select Automate Runs via CLI. I'll scroll down to the Run on CI/CD section and click the Configure command button here. Now I can see that this presents me with an interface that allows me to select different configuration for running Postman CLI on the command line. I can select a collection, I can select an environment if I have one. I can also select a provider for my CI/CD. I'm going to select GitHub Actions. I can also select an operating system that I want this to be run with. There's an option for Linux, Mac, and Windows. Here, I can see that a YAML code has been automatically generated for me. And this YAML code will be used to install, login, and run Postman CLI on GitHub Actions. Here, I could see that my API key is used as a GitHub Secrets. GitHub Secrets allows us to easily and securely manage API keys on GitHub Actions. Alternatively, I could click the Generate API key here to generate an API key on the fly and use it in my YAML code. I'll click the copy icon here to copy this YAML code. Now head over to GitHub. At the top navigation bar, select Actions. Here, I would see a simple workflow card that has a configure button. I'll click on the configure button. GitHub automatically preview this UI with some template YAML code. I'm going to delete this code and paste the code I copied from the Postman's dashboard. I'll click the Start Commit button at the top right, commit new file. Now I'll navigate back to the Actions tab on the navigation menu at the top. I'll click the workflow that is currently running. I'll click Automated API Test. I can see that GitHub Actions is currently running my workflow. There appears to be an error, and this is because I have not set my API key using GitHub Secrets. To set my API key using GitHub Secrets, navigate to the Settings tab at the top navigation menu. Then on the side menu, come to the Security section and click on Secrets. Select Actions. There's a new repository secret button at the top right. I'll select that. Now we need to give our repository secret a name and set the secret. This is where we'd set our API key. I'll go back to the dashboard on Postman and copy this key that was used for our secret. I'm going to be using this as the name of my secret on GitHub Actions. Now I'm going to copy and paste my API key in the secret menu here. I'll click on the Add Secret button. Now I've added my API key as a GitHub secret. I can now go back to the Actions tab at the top navigation menu. Click on the failed workflow and select Rerun Jobs at the top right. I'll rerun all jobs. Select Rerun Jobs. Now GitHub Actions has started to run this workflow. I'll click on Automated API Test. I can see that now Postman CLI was able to log in and we do not have any error. And all of my collections has been successfully run on my CI pipeline on GitHub Actions. Let's head over back to our Postman dashboard. I'll click on my collection. On the runs tab here, I can see the run that I just did on my CI pipeline using Postman CLI. I can see that it took 4 seconds to run and all the tests passed. To confirm that this is actually running our collection correctly, let's make one of our tests fail. I'll go to the Send Fruits request here. Then on the Test tab, this test checks that our response code has a status of 200. I'm going to change this 200 to 404, which is not the response that it's going to get. I'll click the Save button. I'll go back to GitHub. I'll click the Rerun All Jobs button at the top right. I'll rerun all jobs. And now I should expect that one of my requests should fail. I'll click on Automated API Test. Here, I can easily see that there are three assertions, of which one of them failed. And the assertion that is failing is the one that was just modified. If we change this back to 200 and we click Save, and we go back to GitHub Actions and we run all jobs once again, we would easily observe that this time around, all jobs would run successfully. Now I can see that I'll click Run API first. Now I can see that out of 3 assertions, none is failing. If I go back to the Postman dashboard and I click on my collection and I navigate back to the Runs tab, I can see the 2 most recent runs, of which the last one was not failing and the one before that was failing. This puts all of our collection run in a single place, regardless of whether we're run using the collection runner or via Postman CLI or any other command line.